myself again. But it's the only way you're ever gonna learn. You look back and it's all in the past. I'm dwelling on the thoughts I cannot say to you. If I don't say the words, then maybe it's not true.
Hi, welcome to Steve Wraith's True Crime Podcast. And today is not a crime podcast, it's another podcast with another author. And delighted to welcome my good friend and fellow Newcastle fan, James Cars, who I promised I would get on at some point. And it's because we came together in 2021 to do this wonderful book called The Tao of Old School Boxing, the definitive guide to knockout power. And it's been illustrated beautifully by Richard Gore. And what attracted me to publishing this book, James, was the fact that I'm a Bruce Lee fan. And that book is something which I've kept in pristine condition, The Tao of Jeet Kune Do. And as soon as you came to me with this particular project and said, would you be interested in publishing my book? I said, yeah. And it was the name attracted us. But then when I saw the wonderful illustrations and then read, your own wonderful take on the art of pugilism, it's what, it made it a no-brainer for me, mate. But welcome to the show. Let's talk about the book first, right? What was the idea behind it? What was the inspiration?
Well, the idea behind the book was, and I guess we'll talk more about me later on, but being a lifetime student of boxing and fan of boxing, I wanted to write it started off as a technical manual about how boxers used to fight, how technique had changed over the years from the so-called sort of golden era to the modern day and age of boxing, how the sport has changed completely because it's been through massive sweeping changes on how, boxers are trained, how they fight, all that kind of stuff. And everybody always reflects back, don't they, and say, how would a modern boxer do against an old school boxer and all of the differences. So I wanted to do a book that looked at what those key differences were, why boxers were great back in the day, what is it that we have today that is better or worse to be able to have a look at, from training methods, technique, trainers, mindset, all that kind of stuff, and that's how we got started. And as you mentioned, when I approached you in the film, we didn't have the title then, and it was you that said to me, well, this reminds me a bit of Tao of Jeet Kune Do. And I think at that point you probably didn't know my martial arts background, so that was also something for me that kind of solidified, right, this is the right guy to help make this book happen at the same time as well, because being a lifetime Bruce Lee fan myself as well, because he was incredibly inspirational in the fighting arts in terms of his level of research that he did, and that book actually that we just mentioned, it is the collection of everything that he put together, and I've actually got my copy of it signed by his daughter Shannon Lee as well.
Fantastic, great stuff. And I mean, the illustrations, was that a deliberate idea from your behalf to have illustrations as opposed to photographs? Because you see a lot of these books and manuals and fight books like this where people just choose to have models, and was it deliberate to go for the artistic side of it?
It was a bit. I wanted it to look old school because it's in the title, and also it's a book about old school. So I grew up collecting old boxing manuals from being a kid, books that were written anywhere from 1900 to 1940, and generally at that point they'd have a few pictures in there of fighters, but most of the time there'd be illustrations and they'd be done in this kind of style. So good friend of mine, Richard Gore, who you mentioned, who's an art teacher and also a big boxing fan, I said to him, hey, look, I've got this idea for a book. But I really want both technical pictures, technique pictures, and the old school boxers drawn in this kind of style. Is that something that you'd be able to do? And it was probably a dream project for him, to be fair. And he, as you said, he's done an amazing job of it. I mean, for the technique ones, I had to take pictures of me doing certain things, then he draw it from there like that, for example. And he's done a great job. But some of the boxers that he's captured as well, which were obviously taken from photographs, and then he drew his kind of style around it as well. I think it's made the book quite different and pretty special, and just for me just captures that kind of whole old school look about it as well, rather than modern, because you can see those pictures on the internet, right? You just type in Mike Tyson, Larry Holmes, and you'll get pictures like that come up. But to see it written in a pencil drawing of that quality, it's just something a bit different. Jack Dempsey as well there. Probably less pictures of him around, a few more, but again, it captures the essence of the time as well.
Yeah, it certainly does. It's a great book, great read, and if anybody wants to buy a copy, I'll stick the link below. You can buy it on Amazon, or you can buy it from our website, which is underneath me there, www.badboysbooks.net, and a few of them are signed as well if anybody would like a copy, but it's well worth a read if anybody fancies it. Okay, let's go back in time then. Tell us a little bit about your upbringing. Where were you born, James?
Yeah, so born and bred down at the coast, Whitley Bay. So brought up there, Whitley Bay High School kid, I left the Northeast, as you know, when I was about 20, and then only returned back 5 years ago. There was a big chunk when I was away from there, but as a kid, pretty much grew up obsessed with martial arts, boxing. Typical story, bit bullied as a kid, overweight, that kind of stuff. Gone into training. Started with Wing Chun with Trevor Jefferson, local teacher from Felling.
So what's Wing Chun? Tell us about it.
Wing Chun is a style of Kung Fu, which was originally practiced by Bruce, actually, by Bruce Lee. It's a Hong Kong-based system, very, very short range, not a sport style at all, a pure fighting, combative system, famous for the 1-inch punch. I'm sure you've heard of that. So the 1-inch punch, which Bruce used to demonstrate all the time, comes from Wing Chun. So it was designed on the streets of Hong Kong, basically, to fight in close range situations. Hong Kong's a very congested, highly dense city. People living in apartments with not much space, very narrow streets and things like that. So this fighting system, which is about 500 years old, was practiced by Bruce as a kid from very, very famous Grandmaster Yip Man, which has been movies made about. Donnie Yen, I think there's 3 or 4. Mike Tyson was in the last one, actually. Ip Man 4. So it's it's a famous style that came out of Hong Kong, and it's got many, like a lot of things, a lot of close synergies to boxing as well, and how it produces power. And that's the first system that I started in.
Was it easy to find somebody to instruct in that, in the Northeast, or did he go away to do that?
No, I was 12 years old, so it wasn't really an option to go away. And I'd become interested through watching Bruce Lee movies, which I probably shouldn't have been watching at that age at the time, but I did. I was very lucky. So there's been a bit of a Northeast connection to Wing Chun, actually. So there was a guy who came out of Hong Kong. Again, I believe he was from Gateshead, called Alan Lam, and he was in Hong Kong in the 60s, early 70s, before the Bruce Lee craze started. I never met Alan; he passed away quite recently, but he came back to the Northeast and he taught a few people here, including Trevor, my teacher. And then the Bruce Lee craze happened, which just everyone went nuts, right? In the early 70s, everybody was watching the movies, wanting to learn stuff. And Alan went over to LA and he became really famous over there. And he had a school over there teaching loads of people. So there was a Northeast connection to it from him. And then, so Trevor was the only guy that was teaching at that period of time. And most of the Wing Chun teachers that are in the Northeast now have come from him. Some of them have gone off and done other things and found other teachers, but he was the original teacher. Doesn't get a lot of credit for that as well.
So was there many other people studying that at that age in the Northeast?
Not really. Handful. Most kids, when they start martial arts, right, they do judo, they do karate, they do taekwondo. They go through the system of getting the belts and all that kind of stuff. It's good discipline. This stuff that I've been around is very, very specialized. And because it's very technique based as well, you're not going into competitions. You're not trying for the next grade and to get the next belt. You need to have a lot of patience for that type of training. So it tends to put kids off. So, you'd never have probably more than a dozen people in a class would be good going for that kind of stuff, just because it takes a lot of patience. It's hard training. It's, holding low stances, basic fundamentals. So a lot of people just don't have the patience or the I guess the mental resilience to do that type of stuff as well. But for me, I loved it. I absolutely loved it, and I had, you know, save all my money in my pocket money. I had private lessons with my teacher once a week, that kind of stuff, and you know, I studied with him for nearly 5 years.
How, you know, where did you progress from there then?
So, well, basically, I got to that point, and I wasn't that academic, but I loved sport, and I was always highly involved in doing research, reading books on martial arts at that time, and boxing as well. So I got involved in some boxing training. I used to train down at Somerville in Long Benton, which obviously doesn't exist now. It was a great boxing club in the day. I realized that for my studies, what I really wanted to get into was the sports science kind of stuff. So I did my BTEC at North Tyneside College. As I said, wasn't academic, didn't have any GCSEs or anything. So I had to go through the hard route, do a BTEC. And then I managed to kind of blag my way onto a degree course down at the University of Bedfordshire for a sports science degree. Slightly embellished some of my qualifications and stuff I had at the time, but sometimes you have to do it. So I left the Northeast, and that was going back mid 1990s. So I went away down to Bedfordshire, horrible little town called Luton. Loved it really, but it's rough. And spent the next 3 years there. I was studying sports science degree, but I got involved in doing lots of other martial arts. So the original plan was, Trevor had said, why don't you go and start a club at the university when you go down there? Got there was already a club. So I thought, I went there, trained there, didn't really like it, wasn't very good. So I decided I'll just go off and see what else I could do. So at that point, I started doing Muay Thai, started doing Silat, or boxing again, all sorts of different stuff. I was training every day while I was studying. Also, like a lot of people who get involved in these things, I got the chance to work on the door. Started off at the university doing their nightclub called The Underground. We used to have a private security company come in at the weekends. They asked me to do some work for them as well. So I was working around doing that, which was a great learning experience for doing the art as well at the same time. I know you've been through that world. So that made me, that was probably the most period of time in terms of education on learning on what works and what doesn't work, what works in theory, what works inside a gym, and then in real life when someone's 200 pounds bigger than you, that it will do. So that was a fantastic period of time for me, actually, those 3 years. And then obviously worked hard to get my degree, did all of my kind of studies, assignments, my dissertation I did around sports psychology, personality traits on fighters, on competitive fighters. So it's, we're talking 25 years ago this now. So it's always been there right from back in the day.
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating. And your story in itself, going across to, Hong Kong, where you spent, was it probably 10 years of your life?
Yeah, it was more. It was about 12, 13 years. Yeah. Yeah.
So why go across there? Was that because that is where you were going to get the best teaching? Is that because spiritually that was the right place? What took you there?
I think all of the above. So I got to the point after I finished uni. I worked as a personal. I came back to the Northeast for a little bit. I was back here for about a year. Worked as a personal trainer. Needed to earn some more cash. Girlfriend at the time was from London, so I went down to London. Got into recruitment to sort of pay the bills and get some money. So I was working in recruitment down there, still doing all my martial arts, checking out who was down, because there's a lot going on in London, right? Checking out all the different clubs and teachers and training down there. And then started to feel that, my real calling would be to go out to the source. Something I'd gone out, I'd done a couple of training trips out to Thailand and into Hong Kong. And I just thought, it's one thing being what you call a kung fu tourist, going out there for a week or whatever, meeting a master, doing some lessons, but actually going out there, studying full time is a massive difference. So I just made, it was, big, massive decision for me. I managed to get a job out there. So I went through the process and did all the interviews and that online. So I thought, okay, that's going to help me set out there, and then just packed up my stuff. And staying down in London at the time, I was like, right, that's it. I'm moving to Hong Kong with no real game plan on how long that was going to be for. Thought could be a couple of years. We'll see how it goes. And I ended up staying out there for 12 years, which was just, amazing, fantastic period of my life. And as I said, the main motivation was, right, meet the best people that I could. All about research. What can I learn? How can I develop? Who's brilliant? So being in Hong Kong as well gave me the opportunity to travel out to Taiwan, China, Japan as well, all to meet different martial arts masters, different clubs, different people, and to try and find commonalities between them. And if I found somebody who was better than someone else, then I could learn from them as well. And this kind of process just went on and on and on for years.
How did you make ends meet when you were out there?
So I was working in recruitment still, so that funded and financed everything for me. So I was just lucky that I'd fallen into it when I was in London. So and I was doing a lot of recruitment for banks and stuff like that. So financial services recruitment. So I'd gone out there, worked for an American company actually, and it was hard graft. I was in the office like 7:30, 8 o'clock, out at 6, and then bang, straight into training. Every single night, training 4 or 5 hours, and they don't have classes that are on sort of like 7 till 8 o'clock at night or anything like that. The place will open up about 5 o'clock, Kwun, which is like the dojo, Chinese word for dojo, and it'll be open the whole evening up until 10 o'clock. So you can just literally go in there, train 5-6 hours. So I was doing that every night. Then my whole weekend spent training as well. So yeah, it was a busy time.
Yeah, no, it certainly sounds like it. How did you adapt to the culture then? Because obviously it's a big move going from the streets of London and all that brings to heading across to a far eastern country and having to adapt to the diet, I guess, the food that they eat out there, but also acclimatizing to the humidity and maybe it's the pollution. I don't know. Tell us how you adapted to that.
Yeah, well, for me, you know what? Because I'd had my years of doing. By the time I'd gone out, I'd had at least 15 odd years of. I mean, I was in my late 20s, 30s, but I'd already been training since the age of 12, 13. So I'd been exposed to a lot of Chinese stuff from that training, and I made the effort before I'd gone to learn some of the language. So when I got out there, I was very different from the expat community that I was working with. A lot of them came out there, Aussies, South Africans, people from the UK, other places, not really any interest in the local culture, the local language, right? They just wanted to make money and then go out on the piss and stuff like that. So for me, I got out there and I continued to learn the language. So I had language lessons at lunchtime and stuff like that when I was at work. So I can speak pretty good Cantonese now, which was hard, right? Language, 9 different tones in it. Really, really difficult. But that gave me a massive advantage, one, in the martial arts community when I was meeting people and be able to talk to them a bit in their language and understand what they were saying. You get a lot more respect and you also get a lot more out of it. But to be able to adapt into the culture rather than just go out there and live as a foreigner, which a lot of expats do, whether they go Hong Kong or Singapore or Dubai or whatever, I wanted to really immerse myself into it. So that means, like you said, eating the local food, getting used to the heat, which was horrific when you're training as well, training in places that doesn't have any aircon or anything like that, 100% humidity, just sweat, just like horrific. But obviously that's the life out there. So I absolutely loved it. So I became, and my friends who I've still got, to this day from over there. And obviously Hong Kong's been going through a lot of political stuff, really, really tough time of things. So a lot of people leaving now. But they would consider me more like a local than an expat, just the life that I led over there. And I had some Western expat friends, but most of my friends were Chinese, and met my wife over there who's local Hong Kong. And again, that helps immerse you even further into the culture and stuff like that. And I think if you're going to go somewhere and do something like that, why would you want to live like a foreigner? You need to learn, and you've got to adapt, and it makes you more all-rounded as well.
Did you compete out there?
I did. So I went back to my boxing world. So there was a big up-and-coming white-collar boxing scene going on over there. So, and obviously I was involved in the martial arts. A lot of the martial arts competitions that are there are not what I'd call realistic. A lot of them are not. And that's one of the difference, I suppose, between some of the traditional martial arts and modern-day combat sports like boxing, BJJ, MMA, and stuff like that. So white collar was up and coming. So I was training in Muay Thai gyms, got asked, if I fancy doing competition there. I hadn't boxed since my kind of teenage days, really. So I got involved in that. So I competed in quite a few white collar boxing tournaments, club fights, stuff like that. Loved it. Absolutely was brilliant. And obviously out there you got mixed quality of people. And, you know, it's same in the white collar world now. You can get people who've never done any training and they can prepare them for a fight in 6 weeks, or you can get a lot of people who do a lot of other stuff. And like I did, so you never know what you're going to meet. I mean, my first white collar fight was a funny one because I was fighting a Hong Kong guy, but he was a karate teacher. He was teaching. So I was a Western guy, kung fu practitioner, doing Chinese martial arts, fighting a Chinese guy who did Japanese martial arts. And yet we're both in there doing boxing, knocking 7 bells out of each other. So that was a lot of fun, and it really helped me in my development as well. As I said, to be able to test out what you're doing in that kind of environment, because you could talk about, well, I've got superior technique, or this would really work. The classic one from traditional martial arts is, oh, my stuff's too dangerous to do in the ring. I only do it on the street, and they've never had a fight in their life. So you get a lot more credibility and a lot more confidence in what you're doing. I think when everyone knows when you've gone in the ring and you've been hit and you've lost and you've been down, all that kind of stuff. It gives you an edge.
Yeah, no, certainly must do. I mean, the amount of training that you've had to do over the years as well, it shows that level of dedication that you've actually got. Tell us about the different disciplines that you've learned, though, because just scrolling through, the various things that you got on your Facebook page, you had a fighting arts page. I had a good look through that, and the videos you've got on YouTube. We'll put the link below. You haven't just gone and learned one. You've learned as many as possible over that period of time. Which is the most difficult?
Ooh, that's a good question, because when you go into the world of Chinese martial arts in particular, it opens up such a myriad of different styles, and you've seen them from movies and from the old Shaw Brothers movies and stuff, drunken styles and monkey style and all this kind of stuff. I've never been into the big gymnastic flashy stuff. I've always been into the more practical, combative stuff, and also stuff like Muay Thai as well, and Silat, which is obviously proven styles. In the Chinese systems, they're generally as well, they're differentiated between internal and external. An internal style is what people will see, things like Tai Chi, and suddenly think about all people in the park moving in slow motion and stuff like that. But actually back in the day, 100 years or so, these were the bodyguards in China. So it was a very vicious, nasty martial art. A lot of it's been lost in the sands of time. But learning a lot of that stuff was really, really difficult. As I mentioned before, the patience level. The art that I found to I guess really discovered myself into is called Yichuan. So that's a more modern Chinese martial art. It's invented about 100 years ago. So this guy in China, Wang Zhanghai, he basically he went around and challenged loads of people. He was a bit of a tinker in his day. He liked to fight, and he thought there was a lot of people who didn't really have fighting experience, didn't know what they were talking about. So he challenged loads of people, lost a few fights, won more, and he basically designed this system that was to simplify technique. He said people, and it's true in martial arts, non-sporting ones get obsessed with forms and katas and long patterns of techniques. And he said, look, it's not about that. It's about power development, and it's about simplifying things. So we call his art mind boxing, which is Yichuan in Chinese, translated. And the art was really about how you use the mind to train the body together as one. So, and this is where the standing practices come in, which we might call, from a Western point of view, isometrics. When people do things like wall sits, where they sit against a wall in a half squat, hold it for 5-10 minutes, longer than that. So the system's all designed around a series of exercises like that, except you don't use a wall. You're doing really low stances. Sometimes your hands are above your head, all this kind of stuff. But it builds deep body connectivity, tendon power. Doesn't make you big and ripped. Doesn't give you bodybuilder muscles or anything like that. But when you meet people who are really, really strong, but you can't tell when you meet them because they've got that kind of internal power. Sometimes people who work, as joiners or carpenters and stuff like that as well, they get that kind of power which you can't get within a gym. So what I found with each one was it completely changed my body. I'd done loads of weights and stuff before and traditional fitness training, if you like, but this was proper old school stuff. And stuff that would challenge your mind, challenge your body, rip it apart in some ways, and then rebuild that connective tissue around the whole body just to make you really strong.
I remember years ago as well, watching the same films as you did, Bruce Lee, and you would watch TV programs like The Water Margin and Monkey. And you pick up these images of huge gatherings of well-disciplined young Chinese guys who are all very well built, not to pick a fat on them, and all practicing in the morning. And you actually saw that for real at those early morning practices in Shaolin.
I did. I went up to, so as part of my research, I went up to the Shaolin Temple, the real one, which is in Henan province in northern China. Spent a week there, saw the training that the guys went in for there, which was just intense. I thought training in Thailand was intense. Anyone who's been over there and trained in a Muay Thai camp knows that it is. But over there, they take kids from a really young age, hundreds of them, and just train them from 5:30 in the morning, calisthenics, running up the mountains. They're literally sparring, weapons. They're training all day long, and they then get recruited to be either bodyguards or trainers, or they go into the army as well. So it's like a kind of boarding school for young kids, but some adults go there for training as well. I learned some of the qigong systems, which is like the breathing exercises and stuff that they have there, which is again really good supplemental training stuff that we used to have in boxing back in the day. Well, if you read the old school boxing manuals, they'll talk about breathing exercises that did being lost in the sands of time now. But that's another thing that I found is some of the similarities between training and condition methods across different parts of the globe were really similar. It's just that we've lost that now. We've moved on to do other things, whereas they were still doing it. Exercise like that, which improving your lung capacity and all that kind of stuff. So that was an amazing experience, and you meet people as well that just have incredible power. I mean, there is a lot of BS in martial arts. Don't get me wrong. A lot of people who overegg their experience, who when push comes to shove, they can't really demonstrate it, they can't do it, or they'll do it against a compliant partner or one of the students. And I'd always look to kind of sniff that out, because it's one thing when you watch somebody do something on someone else that they train with, but then when they do it on you and you've got no kind of skin in the game, doesn't, and I'd never go in a disrespectful way trying to make anybody look bad or anything like that. But I also would never overreact if somebody tried to do something to me and it didn't work. I wouldn't jump back or anything like that. So I was always, which sometimes wouldn't go down very well. But it was where I haven't got time to waste. So I wanted to know who was real and who wasn't. And there's obviously more people that do embellish than actually can do it. So when you find the real ones, it's something special. And I saw some amazing people up there. Went up to Beijing as well. Met some of the old masters, and it's really sad because most of these guys have passed away now. Because you're talking like 15 odd years ago, people who were in their 70s and 80s still moving like a cat. And they didn't, similar to the old school boxing trainers from back in the day as well, they didn't have much of a succession plan. Over in China and Hong Kong now, most of the kids, they're not interested in learning Kung Fu or Chinese martial arts. They haven't got the patience for it. If they are doing something, it's Muay Thai or it's MMA, or football or basketball or whatever. So a lot of that stuff hasn't been passed on. So it was a great opportunity for me, as a Westerner, to be able to learn stuff that I could teach others eventually as well, that otherwise would have died, which is such a shame.
Big shout out to our sponsors, Spider Miner, who have worldwide coverage. Get your Spider Miner today. Big thanks to skipsandbins.com. Telephone 0800 25 45 25 3. Email inquiries at skipsandbins.com. Website www.skipsandbins.com. Easy, contract free, and pay as you go waste collection. Thanks also to L&G Family Funeral Directors, 01913897245. And the Garden of Healing Dispensary, CBD, hemp and cannabinoid specialists, www.thegohd.com. Thanks to qtechshop.co.uk, the makers of pool tables and snooker tables in Wallsend, Newcastle, and the guys who run our website, nufcmatters.com, and badboysbooks.net. Thanks also to Clekai. Meet the new game over screen. Drop into a CleRun device near you. Available on Apple Store, Google Play, and CleRun.game. And to jabsignature.co.uk. Thanks to Media Arts for all their help with videos, etc. If you want to subscribe, hit the Newcastle Legends logo in the bottom right-hand corner, and you can subscribe for free. We still do 7 shows a week. Hit the thumb up to like the video, and click share to share to your social media, and drop into the comments to post a comment about the video you're watching. We're also available as a podcast on iTunes and on Spotify and all podcast providers. And don't forget, we do support the food bank on this program. If you want to make a virtual donation, go to nufcfansfoodbank.co.uk and you can make a donation into the match day bucket. Just want to talk a little bit about a guy you came across in Guangzhou, is it? The Master Hong, who was is it a Baji teacher? Now, the reason I really wanted to talk to you about this is because obviously, Bare Knuckle is really not this guy. This guy is the one who's the street defense. I think it was the guy. Is that right? He didn't speak English or Cantonese.
Yeah. About him. No one asks me about him, actually. I've never been asked about him. He was a special guy. I've never been asked about him.
Well, I'm fascinated about this guy because I watched your YouTube video, and again, the link's below in the description box. But this guy, I think you described him as hard as nails, and you wouldn't want to bump into him on a dark night. But why did this guy impress you? Tell us about him.
Well, I met him through one of my teachers. So he was sort of doing a bit of a reverse of what I did, but he's a lot more experienced than me. He came to Hong Kong for a trip, and he wanted to meet all of the best martial arts teachers in Hong Kong, and he was which can sometimes be seen as a bit of a challenge at times when he did, and my teacher introduced me to him, and Baji's a very interesting direct style, lots of elbows, lots of knees, headbutts, really really rare style, and I hit, even though we didn't speak the same, like he speaks Mandarin, can understand Cantonese, so couldn't speak a word with him, but I just hit it off with him straight away because I could just see this guy was just a real fighter. He'd spent years in the army. He was a lovely guy though. He had adopted kids and stuff like that. But he just switched when he went into training mode and he went into practice mode. He just absolutely switched, and the power he could produce. I mean, he was shorter and stockier than what I am. But just so explosive, so good. So I only met him for a few days in Hong Kong, and then me and my teacher at that time, Mr. Tang, we were going up to China on a training trip into Guangzhou, which is in southern China, and he'd said, shall I give Mr. Hong a bell and we'll catch up with him, and basically we spent more than a week with him. Training every day, meeting other people with him as well, and he was just hard as nails. I remember some of the stuff that he did, some of the techniques, skin ripping and stuff like that. He did one where he'd hit low, come down, just drop his body down, grab the skin on the inside of your leg, and then be able to yank. It was just horrible, just nasty stuff you wouldn't even think of doing, but he could do it. He could pull it off, and he could make it work. So that was a really really good experience to train with him, actually.
And his clothes in the video that I saw were full of hidden weapons and knives.
Yeah, he had weapons everywhere. He had up his sleeves, hidden pockets, little knives, long knives, short knives. I remember the he just did some mad things. He was like, and he just like impromptu just want to come and fight you all the time. And he'd go, right, come here, pull his hat off, just throw his hat in your face, and then just come forward and smack you and stuff like that. He was just off it, but just a real fighter, like a tiger. When he had that look in his eyes when he switched on, but he'd suddenly just pull out a weapon from somewhere, and you just go, Jesus Christ! I mean, God knows what life he'd had before and what he'd been through and stuff like that. But he was lovely. And he was really, he was always very controlled with it and stuff like that as well. He'd never hurt you, but you just knew when you're in someone's company like that. Within, and I had years of training, so within a split second, this guy could kill me if he wanted to. But he was really really keen to share and to talk. And I said I hit it off with him. And you know, I did hours of training with him in that stuff, and it was just learned loads. He was amazing, actually.
Yeah, fascinating video. Watch it below, and give a subscription to the channel. The other thing I wanted to speak about, where I was getting confused, was I've obviously been down to watch 3D Fight Club recently, and I've got a bit of an interest in this bare knuckle. As long as it's done properly and it's done under the right conditions, and everything is above board. I quite like the brutalness of the bare knuckle game, and again, something I stumbled across on your channel was Muay Baran. Forgive us if I'm not saying it correctly.
That's right. Yeah.
But obviously that's the bare knuckle ancestor of Muay Thai,
Exactly.
isn't it? And you trained in that intensively. And again, I'll put the link of the video below. What was that like?
That was amazing. I didn't spend as much time training as I'd like to have done, actually. But again, really, really hard to find. That's the teacher there, who's based out of a gym in Phuket. And he was in his 50s, phenomenal shape, abs, years and years and years of training. Again, ex-army. So Muay Thai boxing came from Muay Baran. It was the original ancestor art. So if you can remember, I'm sure you must have seen the movie Kickboxer, Jean-Claude Van Damme. Do you remember when he's dipping his fists into the glass, into the resin? That's what they used to do in Muay Baran for gloves. So they'd use the resin, they'd use the glass, and that's how they make gloves. So they still do a similar style to this in Burma, actually, as well. I've got a friend who is from the UK who competes and trains in that, and they can do headbutts and all sorts of stuff. But Muay Baran it's the original style. I'll tell you who else trained it. You might have heard of the movie star Tony Jaa, who'd been in it. So he trained in that as well. So you'll see him doing all these fancy elbow techniques and jumping knees and stuff like that. But it's very, very practical. And they use every part of their body, and it's tried and tested in the ring as well. It's not one of these arts where people can just talk a great game and go into all the theory and stuff like that. They really get in and they train it. And yeah, I did some really good sessions with that guy, and that was amazing to train. You think, like, even just so many ways you could throw an elbow. You think an elbow is just an elbow, but he'd be coming from all sorts of different angles, all sorts of different ways of throwing it. Very, very difficult to defend, and again, can do it from really, really close range, and you get hit with something like that, you know what I mean, a lot of damage, you're only going to go down.
Yeah, no, I mean, fascinating. And again, give the video a watch. It's amazing to see just the different techniques and the different disciplines that you've picked up and you've learned. And right at the start, we talked about Bruce Lee. And Bruce Lee has been an integral part of your life. You're a huge fan, etc. And you've done a few things. I mean, you visited obviously, I guess, his place of birth, but you've also you've been to visit his last resting place as well with your son.
Yeah. So when I left Hong Kong, we lived in Vancouver for just under 2 years, and Seattle's obviously very close to Vancouver. It's just over the border. So Bruce, when he left Hong Kong as an 18-year-old, that was his first place where he went to, Seattle, and went to university there, and he developed his martial arts there as well, Jun Fan, which became Jeet Kune Do, and all that kind of stuff. So, and ultimately he was buried there because it had a very close place in his heart and his wife and family's heart as well. So in Hong Kong, yeah, you're right. I went to all the places that are famous for Bruce Lee, including meeting some people who'd been around him as well and trained. So I've met a few that have firsthand been around him, which was incredible. And yeah, so I wanted to visit that grave. Was obviously a really meaningful thing for me as well. But I think Bruce Lee, he gets a lot of stick because a lot of people say he wasn't a real fighter, and you have to look back to that period of time, right? There was no MMA, there was no UFC, there was no international kickboxing or anything like that. The only thing he could have competed in was point karate, where they just score 1 point, boom, and then the bat. I mean, is that what's that anyway? He had an amateur boxing record as a kid, so he was when he was 18, I think he was a high school boxing champion, competed amateur. People don't know that. So he had a really good boxing record. The same year he won that boxing championship, he won the Cha-Cha championships as well. So you know what we always say about boxers being good dancers. So he obviously had great rhythm, great timing as well. Fantastic, gifted athlete, but also worked really hard. And people say, you know, he is given credit for being the founder of MMA, because he's the first. He came to the West and he realized a lot of the traditional stuff that he learned didn't work when it came to contact. It didn't work when he was doing it against a wrestler or a boxer. So rather than bullshitting, he just right, I'm going to learn their methods. So he went off and he learned everything that he could do. He learned stuff like judo and wrestling and ground techniques. He went deep. A lot of his students were boxers, so he went deeper and deeper into technical boxing as well, and put his system together, which was supposed to be evolving anyway. It was supposed to be an ever-changing style. So I met a guy in Hong Kong, one of his called Ted Wong, again now sadly passed away, but he was one of Bruce's long-term students, almost like his successor. And he'd moved over to the States, but he came back to Hong Kong and did a little seminar for the locals there. So I was lucky that I got invited to that and to do some training and see how his style worked, which was very different to what he did in the movies. You know, that, I mean, obviously he did all the flashy stuff in the movies to make it look really good, but his real interpretation of Jeet Kune Do's style was very simplistic, very, very direct, very much based on fundamentals, just hit. He took out all the trapping and blocks and stuff like that. He adopted more of a boxing guard, and yeah, it was really, really good to see.
Yeah, you might not have been in Enter the Dragon, but you did manage to feature in this. Tell us about this.
It was an advert, so for a clothes shop, and that is my son Aaron, that opened in Hong Kong. And they one of the outfits they had was the yellow Game and Death tracksuit that Bruce Lee got famous for. Obviously, worn by Uma Thurman in Kill Bill as well. So I'd seen it and I was like, oh, I've got to have that, and bought it for my son. And the owner of the shop was talking to me, and then found out I was martial arts teacher and stuff, and that's they ended up putting us on an advert for them as well, which was really cool. It was really cool. Yeah,
absolutely brilliant. Obviously, you absorbed all this knowledge and all this training over that period of time, and what better thing to do than to go out and share that with people? And that's what you do now, isn't it?
Yeah. So came back to the UK about 5 years ago. And as I said, when I went out there, it was never the plan to stay. It would just go with the flow and see what happened. So it was a good 12 years. A young family, time to come back to the Northeast. My parents still around, not getting any younger, stuff like that. Wanted the kids to get access to their grandparents and all that kind of stuff. And it's funny because one of the first questions people always asked me when I came back was, why did you come back? I said, well, I never really thought I was going to go away. Why wouldn't I come back? It's the best place in the world to live, in the Northeast. You know what I mean? I'd say come home every year for Christmas anyway. So it was always in the plan to return. So yeah, as I said, came back about 5 years ago, and started to slowly teach. I've never been one for putting myself out there massively or anything like that. So I took on a few private students who wanted to learn each one and different training methods. Typically, the people who come to me were all teachers of other styles as well and other systems. So I had a few guys from London and down south. So went down there, started doing some seminars, teaching people down there as well. And then gradually build it up. But I've always been a big believer in keeping quality high. Not trying to get hundreds of students, didn't want to open a school or anything like that. Just really train people who wanted to really learn it, who were keen to learn. And then obviously in 2020, we lose track of years now. The pandemic and everything hit and lockdown, so I had to ease that back. And then a couple of guys said, "Do you want to try doing Zoom, teaching on Zoom?" Now the good thing about each one is that because you're holding a lot of these static postures and static training and single technique movements. You don't need a lot of space to move around. As I mentioned before, these systems were taught in crowded, congested places where you don't have that kind of space. And so funnily enough, it adapted quite well to Zoom. At that period of time, I just published my first book, which was on each one as well, which was not exactly too many books written on that subject, and that was starting to pick up a bit. So I put my first Zoom lesson out, thinking no idea who was going to turn up or anything like that. And literally when I opened the link, I had people on there from France, Italy, Canada, all of these different countries who wanted to learn this stuff, didn't have access to a teacher. The only way they could learn it would be to go over to Asia or whatever. So was something completely unexpected for me, totally unexpected. And then so was kept very, very, very busy during the pandemic. I mean, I still teach someone Zoom now, but from teaching all over the world. And that's led on to now, going over to different countries like Italy. I've been over twice in the last 6 months, going over next month. People flying over here. I've got a really guy who's been with me for nearly 3 years now, Martin, who's from Denmark. He's the ex-special forces guy, works in security, and he comes over here to Newcastle and spends weekends training with me, goes back. It's just opened up so much stuff that I never would have expected to have happened. That's gone on since then. Also did a seminar earlier this year in Northern Kings, the Muay Thai gym in Newcastle, brilliant gym run by Craig, and taught some of their fighters, their pro fighters, some of the each one stuff, which went down well there. So I've got a guy I'm working with, Jack Bullock, who's a pro fighter. He's training hard with me on that stuff, and then doing some more work with them. So it's been really, really busy, really busy.
Yeah, that's great. It's fantastic, and a little bit of film work. I mean, obviously, I've done a few over the years myself. It's that's my passion, as you know, being an actor. But you have had a little bit of taste of fame, haven't you? Tell us about that.
I have, probably not quite as much as you, Steve, but
each to their own, mate.
Yeah. I always tell people, for the movies I've been in Hong Kong, you could get in for free, but you had to pay to get out the cinema. So obviously, growing up with this stuff, it was always a lifetime dream for me to be around that as well. So a couple of things. So I got to be very good friends with a guy called Bay Logan. So Bay is he's from the UK originally. He used to be the editor of Combat magazine here back in the day, and he's a producer of movies across there. Also a massive kung fu fan and teacher himself. So I got to be good mates with Bay. And he's produced a few American productions and obviously lots of local ones. He works a lot with Jackie Chan and Donnie Yen and people like that. So there was a movie that he was working on as producer, Lady Blood Fight, which was it's on Amazon Prime actually, which was a kind of remake of Bloodsport with women in it. Amy Johnson, who's the lead on it, was very good actually. So I got to be an extra in that, in one car park scene, massively beaten up by Amy. I did another one which we filmed in China, which was really funny because it was a period movie and I played a Russian boxer in it. So I had all that braces on and all that kind of stuff. And I had some speaking lines in this one as well, actually, although it's been dubbed over in different languages and all sorts of stuff. But in that movie, I had a horse, and someone's poisoned my horse, and someone has killed my horse, and so the director of the movie spoke pretty good English. He said, "Can you do a Russian accent?" And I said, "Oh yeah, no problem. I can pull that off, no problem at all." So I meant to run out into this scene and scream, "Who's killed my horse?" So I thought, I'm a bit of a laugh here, because none of these guys know what a Russian accent is. That's the thing. They've asked me whether they can do it. So I've got the scene. So I run out, and I've got the outtake of it. Actually, they did dub over it, and I go my strongest Geordie accent. "Who's killed my in Horse Lake?" And they filmed that, and they used it in it, but they dubbed over it eventually. But you can see it. But I've got the outtake with the original one. And it was just hilarious. But I tell you,
what was that film called?
That film was called The Master.
There we go. I'm already queued up.
Yeah, and you can
So
see,
there you go.
see that bit in the trailer as well with the horse as well.
Go and have a look for those films. Well worth.
Yeah,
Well
it was
worth
a really good laugh. But I tell you what, they go full contact when they film that stuff. There's no, especially to the body. There's no pads or anything like that. I'd just done a white collar a week before, and I went up to China to film that one, The Master, for a couple of days. And they see a Westerner come up, and obviously you're a lot bigger than them, and all these stuntmen who the fighters said, they just think, right, I'm going to have a crack. So I was expecting people to be pulling punches and stuff like that. They don't. They absolutely go. And so I was like, all right, it's going to be like that, is it? So I thought, come on. So it was. But I remember getting the bus back to Hong Kong. It was like a 3-hour bus ride back, and I was bruised and battered. I had so many, because all the different outtakes and stuff that you do.
Yeah, sounds a bit like the week I had last week, mate, and I'm still nursing sore ribs. 3 hours 40. My fight scene took the film last week, mate. Yeah, it looks great, by the way. I've seen a few rough cuts of it, but believe you me, mate,
hard graft, isn't it? People don't realize like the amount of hours. Like that Lady Bluff, I hit that car park so many times on the ground. Hundreds of times to film.
Painful, mate. Very, very, very painful. A bit like following Newcastle United's been for the last 14 years, which dovetails nicely into the last segment of the show. And yeah, look, you're a Newcastle fan like me, mate. How happy were you October the 7th, 2021, when Newcastle United finally saw the back of Mike Ashley and Amanda and Mirdad, Jamie Rubin and PIF came riding into town?
Couldn't believe it. Just absolutely. I mean, like probably like a lot of people thought it was a wind up. At first thought it's been on and off so many times, and obviously had the long period of everything going quiet and thinking, the ship sailed. It's not going to happen. So I think, given the years and years of build up, the on and off, and everyone I think it just made it even more special, didn't it? It was just unbelievable. Why wouldn't anyone want that to happen? It's fantastic for everybody, not least the Northeast as well as a whole, all sorts of different reasons. So very, very exciting. And as you said, lifelong Newcastle fan. What can you say?
And a chance to take your son to St James's Park. Now the big question is he hooked?
He's getting there. But unfortunately, he's got a bit too much of me in him. So he's
more interested in the martial arts.
He is, yeah. He's really into BJJ. So he's been doing that for 5 years now, and he's getting pretty good into his Thai boxing and stuff. I try not to train him because it's just training your kids is hard graft. I've done some with him, but I'm just sending him away at the moment. He's one of three. The other two he's the oldest, but yeah, he's getting there.
Do you think he'll follow in his dad's footsteps, and do you think he'll go globe trotting? And is that in his mindset? Do you think is it a bit too young to think about that? But do you think he may go down that route?
He could do. I mean, I'd never sort of push that on him, and would want him to be his own man and do what he wants to do anyway. But he's certainly he's probably more gifted than what I was at that age. Definitely, he's a very, very good athlete. He's very coordinated and stuff like that. But sometimes when people have that, as you know, they can have an element of laziness with it as well. So I need to kick his ass a bit more. Whereas I might not have been I wasn't the most gifted, but I worked my ass off. So he's got all of the natural talent. We'll see what happens. He's very lucky because he's got a Hong Kong passport, so he can go back anytime. I've lost my PR now. You get a permanent Hong Kong ID after 7 years now, but if you can't go back within 2 years, they take it off you. Because of COVID, I couldn't go back, and the government hasn't allowed any sort of special cases on that, which is a bit of a shame to have lost that. But he's got full passport. All the kids have, so he could go back and he could do that. But again, I would expect him to be doing something different to me, doing it in a different way if he did want to do. And he speaks the language as well. So for a young kid, the world's your oyster, and what's happening with China, like it or not, that's another takeover altogether, isn't it, as well? So I'm sure it'd still be beneficial for him as well.
Multilingual and multi-talented, just like his dad. Get a copy of The Tao of Old School Boxing, the definitive guide to knockout power by James. It's available on our website, www.badboysbooks.net, and from Amazon. And if you have already bought the book, please leave a review, preferably a favourable one. And check out his videos below and subscribe to his channel. James is sharing quite a lot of his experiences on there, and it's well worth looking at if you're interested in martial arts, just as an observer, or maybe somebody who wants to take it up. And check out James on his socials. I'm sure he'd be happy to give you some advice. You might even want to get a tutorial off him, or jump onto one of his Zooms. But James, been an absolute pleasure. Glad we finally got this done, mate. Take care. Speak to you soon.
Thanks so much, Steve. Really appreciate it. Great talking to you.
Cheers, pal.